Ladies and gentlemen, this is the main event. Are you ready? Oh yeah!
And now, coming to you from the .biz radio network on ProWrestling.biz and presented by Wrestling-News.net, it's Main Event Madness. Use the hashtag MEMLive on Twitter to connect with us during the show. And now, here are your hosts for tonight's show, John Curry and Mike Holland.
You've been searching for a savior who's getting wrong. Idealize another prophet from dusk till dawn. Said I'd find him at the crossroads of here nor there. But the way he eclipsed the sky told me I'm heaven sent. And I've been thinking that maybe it's time to let him know that we're alive. Everybody, lift your hands to the sky. If you feel me, let them know that we will survive. Can you hear me? Like I'm loaded and I'm holding a silver tongue from the fire.
All right, folks, welcome to another edition of Main Event Madness Radio, and we're thankful that you guys are tuning in. We appreciate it. It's Christmas time. At least by the time you guys will be listening to this. Hard to believe that it is officially the road to Christmas, if you will. Mike, are you excited for the holly jolly season?
Oh, absolutely, Sean. Nothing could excite me more.
It's gonna be an interesting time. This is typically when WWE kind of goes downhill. So hopefully it's not the case. Excited also on a personal level. By the time you guys hear this show, it'll pop up for me. Next week, I'm going on a cruise.
All right, very good.
Absolutely. First time I've ever been on a cruise. And then next Monday is two things in one day. My 26th birthday, and more importantly, 1 year anniversary with my girlfriend, Shauna. So excited for that. Didn't think she'd be able to put up with me for a year, but it'll be here next week. So excited for both of those, and then the cruise, and then Christmas, and then the whole new year, and this whole shebang starts all over again. But nonetheless, speaking of things starting all over again, we have new reasons to hate Roman Reigns, don't we?
As if we needed them.
As if we needed them. He is the Intercontinental Champion, defeating The Miz last week on Raw. What are your initial thoughts of The Miz as Intercontinental Champion? I'm sorry, not The Miz. Roman Reigns as Intercontinental Champion.
Yes, I know. It's hard to say. You just want to switch it up.
Exactly.
I mean, look, this is another one of those moves that WWE does that just kind of drives me slightly even more unhinged than I already am in the space I normally occupy. Apparently, The Miz is getting time off to film a movie, and that was the reason for the title change, which, okay, fine. But to pick Roman Reigns to be the one to beat him doesn't make a lot of sense to me on the face of it. Now, obviously, a lot of it's going to have to do with what happens from here. But Roman Reigns has basically been fairly unbeatable. And, of course, you would think he's probably got to lose this belt, unless, of course, they're setting up, champion versus champion down the line. So, my early reaction is ugh, as it usually is. There's no offense to Roman Reigns. I mean, it's perfectly fine that he beat The Miz, but I just feel like there's a lot of other people that they could have done this angle with. And I feel like they sort of did it just because they wanted him to have another feather in his cap on his way to,
17th
as
Grand
you
Slam
mentioned,
champion.
the road to Christmas and what?
He is the 17th Grand Slam champion.
Yes, right. And, they wanted to get him in there, and they wanted to do it before they do the other things they're going to do, which is just kind of how it read to me. So, could be wrong, but, I can't say that I'm a big fan of that switch, particularly if it was just done for that reason.
I would imagine to an extent it could have been, because there are a million guys on the roster they could have gave it to that deserve it more than I was about to say Randy Orton, than Roman Reigns. But I don't know. Maybe it'll be good. Maybe it won't be. I'm just curious where the Shield's shenanigans play out, or who will be the one to turn on who. The reports and rumors being that it'll be Dean Ambrose.
Kind of has to be at this point.
I would love it if it was Roman. We can't get that lucky. We really can't. But Reigns as Intercontinental Champion will be interesting. His first advertised opponent is in January, and it's Finn Balor. Oh, poor Finn. Not only did they take away his WWE title match at the Royal Rumble, then he gets fed to Roman.
Yeah,
And the Bullet Club's looking to re-add their original leader if he wants to.
Well, I mean, maybe to your point, John, maybe that's the upshot of this, that they finally, that's another thing that I wouldn't hold my breath, because of course, they didn't invent it, so why would they? They're busy suing, over it, or threatening, but they don't actually want to do it. They just want to own the property. It's like the Monopoly game. But I feel bad for Finn already. I mean, again, if you put stock in such things, you and I read quite a bit of, the behind-the-scenes type of rumor mongering that wrestling specializes in. And what a surprise. The latest stories are that Vince is down on Finn. We had heard, it had even been so far as intimated, if not outright stated, by Paul Heyman, in interviews on Raw, that Finn was going to be a good challenger, going to get a shot, going to get a chance to get his belt back, if you wish. And now it seems that that is off, and he's come out of the Bray Wyatt feud that lasted 4 months and 7 pay-per-views, too long, to getting pinned by Samoa Joe, who admittedly is very good, but on Raw last week. So, it's business as usual, unfortunately. He doesn't really have some of the things that Vince prefers in his, A-plus players, but the guy can go, and unfortunately thus far, other than that brief moment, that flirtation with the Universal title, it seems like he's going to have to wait longer to make his mark, if at all.
I just don't get it. McMahon just loves his big guys, so I'm sure Braun Strowman will get a match or something. Yet, he's not over enough. I'm sorry, who gets the loudest reaction every week? Men, women, children, old people. They love Finn Balor's entrance. They love the demon. They love the lights, the music. But, we're not inside Vince McMahon's head. There's a reason the old bastard's got where he has. So, who knows?
Yeah, I would say to you, I mean, I don't know, this is just speculation on my part, but if I was a conspiracy theorist to some degree, look, I mean, they're in a tough spot with the Daniel Bryan thing right now. I mean, you mentioned who's very popular, who shows up, and when his music plays, I mean, they do Yes chants when Bryan's not even in the building. So it's well known. I mean, there's a lot of comparisons there. Baylor's already got the injury history, and I think that's all Vince needs. I think that, this is going to be the year that potentially, unless the doctors go in a direction that's unexpected, that Daniel Bryan is going to take his leave of WWE and search for some greener pastures where he will be able to wrestle again. And, I've said on the show before, it's not for me to make that decision. The selfish part of me wants to see Daniel Bryan wrestle as long as he wants to. But I think that it has had a bearing on Vince's feelings, or, the overall company's feelings about Finn as champion and even as a credible challenger. I think he's going through some of the same battles that Daniel Bryan did. I think Daniel overcame those, and we looked like, okay, finally they're going to go in another direction. And as we've seen from the handling of Baylor, to another degree, Nakamura, etc., it's kind of like this have your cake and eat it too thing again, where the indie darlings, so to speak, come to WWE, and, they act like that's a really big deal and we should get very excited about it. And then they kind of go, I'm sick of my new toy. Let me go back to the Etch-a-Sketch.
Etch-a-Sketch result. Oh, Randy Orton.
Exactly. Yes.
But that'll be interesting. Roman and Miz, I think, is a very, very good feud that we could see for a while. I would love to see it over the Universal title. Miz comes back. I think, unfortunately, Miz's rematch for the Intercontinental title will happen before WrestleMania. If not, I would love to see Miz come back the night after WrestleMania, if they could hold off that long, and have him be Roman's first feud. To have Miz, I want to say he would be the third person to hold the Universal and WWE titles. But I don't care what anybody says. Miz is more than deserving of being WWE champion.
Oh, yeah. No, listen, I think you're absolutely right. But, I mean, look, again, we've talked about this before too, but if you're going to, WWE, it seems like they're spending a lot of time with their champion trying to present them in the way they want them to be viewed. And you've seen that certainly with Lesnar, but with Jinder Mahal. You've seen it with a bunch of people where WWE wants to tell a story and they need to have a champ and they want to make the guy credible to some degree as champion. And I think that's one of the issues where Miz would suffer because, look, the guy just even gets booked in stuff that doesn't make any sense. His match with Baron Corbin made no sense. The whole point of it was stupid. Heel versus heel, if you want to do it, that's fine. But there was no point. It was like a social media thing. It didn't make any sense. He loses the match, of course. The only person who could possibly lose to Baron Corbin, who's been booked into the toilet before winning the belt, is The Miz. And so, John, I get your point. And it doesn't affect his character. He can lose because that's kind of the point. But I do think you run the risk of making the person just not even in the conversation because you've made them so expendable on so many occasions. And that's unfortunate because, as we saw with Mahal, you don't have to be the world's best worker to be the champion. You just have to have a company that's willing to overlook your shortcomings because you're a hell of a heel.
And I think that's the biggest drawing part for The Miz is the fact that he's arguably WWE's best heel.
Exactly.
But he is, that match with Baron Corbin, did it make sense? No. Case in point, he was the babyface in that match.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. And and like I said, I think the Mahal example, I think we can both agree that he's certainly a far more effective heel than Jinder. And you see what they did with Jinder. And I understand there's other, factors at play there, but it's, they have the ability to, get a guy as high as they want him to go. And there's always going to be a place in wrestling for a guy that is a fantastic heel and can get you to hate him at the drop of a hat. And it's harder to do than you might think. And so, I hope that you're right. And I don't know what they're going to do with Roman. your scenario would be a good one. But it's a good question because obviously they got to put somebody in that spot to challenge him. And, it seems like a lot of the other people are partnered off, but you just don't know what they're going to do with these feuds. I mean, Kane wasn't at Survivor Series. He shows up on Raw to renew hostilities with, Braun Strowman. Like, some of these feuds, it's just, okay, so they're going to have another match, and it's just busy work to keep them away from, somebody else. So it'll be interesting to see what they do, but, you would get no argument from me if The Miz was competing for that belt, because he certainly has earned it, to your point, for his contributions to the heel side.
Absolutely. And, switching gears a little bit, I liked it at first on Monday. I don't like it on Tuesday. I like that the women got the opportunities to be called up, all 5 of them. But Paige, give me 1 second. This is what happens when you don't watch wrestling for a while, guys. Bear with me. Sonya Deville, Mandy Rose, and Paige made their debut and/or return, and it just looked like Team PCB all over again. Paige, Charlotte, and Becky again, but as heels. And then you go to SmackDown, and Ruby Riott, Liv Morgan, and Sarah Logan, I think her name was.
Yep, correct.
Debuted on SmackDown. And you couldn't do it any differently. You had to do the same shit on both shows. And I don't really understand why the need to do the same thing on both shows when your complaint is that the rosters are too stale. So you do the same shit.
Yeah, I mean, I have a couple thoughts on that. First of all, the Paige thing was funny to me because she really was even playing it up as a face before what happened next. So that may have just been, good acting on her part and the direction of the company, but the fans were definitely swerved a bit there because you wouldn't expect Paige to come back as a heel, so kind of strange. And we'll see what happens there with all the issues that she's had. I mean, she's been a tremendous character for them, and of course it's exciting to have her back and part of a new angle, but I do get your point, and I can't argue it. I don't like the repetition. I will say, though, one thing we could or maybe should keep in mind is, maybe these women are all working together, and maybe similar to a John Cena situation, they're just going to come and go, among the brands as they please, in which case that would make a lot more sense, because otherwise I agree with you. I don't really get doing it in that fashion. I also think, the WWE, and I'd be interested on your take on this, John, because this would go even before the last couple of months. It seems to me a lot of times with these NXT folks that they assume that you're watching that product. And that's not a very good assumption to make because, frankly, as good as the NXT product continues to be, many people are not watching it that are watching the weekly shows. So you're bringing up 5 people that many people know nothing about. And the only thing they know is that they'll beat everybody up, which, again, in itself is character development to some degree. So that to me also is a little bit of a tricky thing. I mean, they might be able to work it out, but I just think if you're not familiar with NXT, it's just kind of like a hodgepodge of people that showed up and are being really tough and beating everybody up. And you would hope, once again, like we sort of said last week, that, there'd be a little more to their character than that you could at least give us some reason to understand why are they pissed, what are they trying to do. So we'll see, but I 100% agree with you that if they're not in concert and working together as a larger group, then it really is kind of silly and defeats the effectiveness of night one.
Yeah, that's, from a casual fan's perspective, you'd look at it and be like, wow, Raw got, these 3 chicks, and then you go on SmackDown, like, oh, look at that, SmackDown has a brunette, a blonde, and a pale one. Okay, cool. So they have the exact same thing. So why should I watch these guys when this show has the exact same thing? Why should I care about these ones when they have the same characters?
Right.
And that's their problem, that they won't invest time into the characters. They just, like, to your point, they just assume that we know who they are and knew who they were because a couple of them came in from the Mae Young Classic, and we just assume who they were, or they assume we know who they were before the Mae Young Classic. Even I think NXT kind of failed at that with Kairi Sane and well, that was just the main one. Like she got thrown into it because she won the Mae Young Classic. Okay, she won the Mae Young Classic, but why else should we like her?
Yeah.
She's a pirate. Okay, so was Paul Burchill. Like, don't get me wrong, I think she's very good, but like from a character and story perspective, what reason do we have to like them? We don't have.
Well,
one.
absolutely. Absolutely. And to your point, if it sounds like you're talking about the cruiserweights, that's because you are. It's the same thing. I mean, that television, both of those tournaments were outstanding. I mean, I watched them. I highly recommend anybody that has the network that, has not seen that, go back and watch it because it's very good. I think both tournaments were great. I think the Cruiserweight tournament was better, largely due to the fact that there were competitors in there who have never and probably will never wrestle for WWE for various reasons. But, overall, really, really good. But you look at the Cruiserweights now, and once again, it's a guy who can't wrestle, representing the brand. Do I think he has some talent on the microphone? Absolutely. Does he make me want to leave the room when he starts talking? Pretty much, yes, every time. And then you got a bunch of guys that come down to the ring with him every week. Some of them like him, some of them don't. We don't know why. He doesn't know why. It doesn't matter. And it's kind of unfortunately the same thing. Just bringing them up and saying, here's a name is not sufficient. Even if the name is known. And I'm sure you probably saw, John, they're now Atami is the next one. They've announced that he's going to 205, which is great because the guy is a hell of a worker and probably, I want to say he hasn't gotten a fair shake in NXT. I think, unfortunately, injuries derailed him, but the guy is an internationally renowned wrestler, granted under, another name, and you know how WWE likes to own everything. But, he's going to go into this division, and why do I get the feeling that whatever happens, it's going to be Neville all over again?
Well, and Neville's coming back, so now you have 3 heels, Neville, Itami, and Enzo a jackass, and what credible baby faces are there? They made Kalisto into a joke.
Yeah.
And Kalisto coming into the Cruiserweight division is as not red hot as they did, but they tried pushing him like that. He could have been the division's equivalent of Rey Mysterio. And
yeah,
it just, WWE has a lack of logic, which brings me to my next point, in that on SmackDown, they actually remembered Jinder Mahal exists. And all they did was have the Singh brothers beat up AJ Styles. From a logic perspective, wouldn't it make more sense for Jinder to be like, I want my rematch, which was originally announced that he was going to get his rematch for the WWE title. And then, you're playing hot potato with it, but there's a story with it, so it's okay. Which I think a lot of, that's the misconception. People bitch that there's hot potato with the titles, but people want a story. If there's a story with it, people won't bitch as much, because it shows that they're putting effort into it.
Right.
And everybody loves rubber matches. And if Jinder beat him on Tuesday, and then they have Clash of Champions or Night of Champions, whatever the hell the pay-per-view is called nowadays, you have the rubber match. Have that end in the bullshit way. Have the babyface chase, and then you have AJ and win at the Royal Rumble. AJ defending against Owens at WrestleMania. What's wrong with that?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing. But I think, once again, they have sort of gotten in their own way on this. I mean, they were very committed to presenting Jinder Mahal as a champion when all of us watching it knew that the guy was struggling. The character is fine. It's a little outdated, obviously, as many people have said. You have this guy that most people feel like is not up to snuff, basically decimating Nakamura. So you're crapping all over a guy that just, what was it? Last year's WrestleMania, everybody was so excited about the concept of AJ and Shinsuke doing battle that, the excitement, the buzz was off the charts. And you derail that to make Jinder the champion and whatever. And I realize, he's cheating to win, but at some point, you got to at least give Nakamura something, so you don't do that. Then you sort of randomly take the belt off of Jinder because you realize that no one in the world wants to watch Jinder fight Brock Lesnar unless you just never want to see Jinder again, which even that would have been a better solution than kind of saying, oh, well, Jinder, you were the champion and you were really great and a huge focal point of all the storylines for the last 6 months. Now get out of the way because we want to do this other match that people actually want to see. But don't worry, we'll let you show up and kind of stare and challenge, the guy that just lost. Yeah.
Oh, it was a creepy segment that Jinder just looks at him like he's kind of like stalking him.
Well, it was, and I know you may not have seen it, but the stuff that went on with him and Nakamura was creepy. I mean, they just, like I said, they can't get out of their own way. So if you want to present Jinder as this great wrestler that we're all fooled by, that we're all wrong about, that's fine. But then they abandoned it. And now basically, like you've said, they've diffused all of those characters. Absolutely no one cares if Jinder gets a rematch for the belt. No one cares. We just watched AJ fight Brock, in a match that we discussed and said, obviously everybody knows was great. And now you're going to follow that up with, oh, well, here's Jinder against AJ again. Whoopee.
Yeah, I don't get it. And they do the same angles every time. The Singh brothers cost them, whoever the babyface is, Jinder wins. You have a pay-per-view called Hell in a Cell, and that match is not inside the cage, which makes no sense. And then, what would have helped Jinder, credibility-wise, logic-wise? Having him win a match without them. Then people wouldn't be pissed off.
Well, and like I said, listen, if you want to continue to build him up, then, do so. I mean, whether you and I agree with it or not, if they think that, this is something that makes sense, fine, but they abandoned it clearly when they realized that, people aren't really excited. And even the whole concept of Survivor Series this year was very goofy. I mean, when do you ever remember? You brought up, the titles. Don't call them belts. But, when do you ever remember a Survivor Series where basically 90% of the matches were changed before the event? I mean, it was like when Vince Russo booked Nitro. It was like, well, we had all these guys wrestling these guys, but then we just woke up this morning and realized that they're all bad guys. Like, it doesn't, huh? You didn't realize that Alexa Bliss and Natty were your champions? You needed somebody to kind of help you with that one? You didn't realize that Baron Corbin and The Miz were champs? Like, it just, even for them, I didn't really get it. And it's the second straight event where the changes that they've made The last one due to illness, and this one due to just, I guess, common sense, ended up making the card better. So I can't fully be upset with it, but I think you would agree with me that it's a little scary that these people are responsible for the creative and just abandon the ideas when they realize that the stuff they've been planning out doesn't make any sense.
I think that's being very generous when you say creative with them in mind.
You might be right.
But I mean, you hit the nail on the head. The fact that every single match just about was either heel versus heel, and that takes you back to Vince McMahon's mentality of there's no such thing as baby faces and heels. Then why did you change 90% of the card? Oh, you realize that wins and losses actually do matter? And that's the thing that gets me. Like, there are people that work backstage for WWE. Road Dogg, not too much. Goldust is hilariously, like, corporate stooge now. Like, he bashes anybody that doesn't like, that thinks wins and losses matter.
Right.
And it just, I don't get it, because look at like guys like Wade Barrett and Jack Swagger, and I mean, even like we mentioned before, The Miz, and these guys like Kofi Kingston get booked like shit, and then you expect them to be credible next week. Well, he just lost a 35-second match last week. Why should we care?
Absolutely. And I think, you know, with the majority of the names that you brought up, it's no surprise that most of them aren't in the company anymore. And in the case of Jack Swagger especially, I mean, maybe it's fresh on my mind because of the fact that he, you know, is now pursuing his other interests in earnest. But, I mean, there's a guy who, other than a 5-minute span, when he was first paired with, you know, Zeb, and they were kind of taking advantage of the, you know, the political climate of the time, which I think they did very effectively, and Vince has done very effectively. You're correct. I mean, his whole career in the WWE was show up, something happens. Oh, there's Jack Swagger. I mean, remember when he switched brands? It was like, oh, this is a big deal. Jack Swagger's here. And then 2 weeks later, it was like, is Jack Swagger on this show? So, you know, I mean, listen, I'm not saying all of these guys are going to fit on a roster that stuffed. But, yeah, it doesn't feel very special anymore, does it? I mean, it seems like it's 5 minutes and it's just another gimmick. And they're looking for, you know, help in how to get that guy relevant again. It's a little cuckoo.
And the saddest part is that it feels like nothing's going to change with that anytime soon. But one thing that I hope will change is that the storyline seems like Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn are on their way out of SmackDown and back to Raw. You know, the angle this week was that if they didn't win their match, they were going to be fired or something like that.
Yeah.
And now they set up Randy Orton versus Kevin Owens for next week.
Yeah.
Which that's a match I'm excited for.
Yeah. Well, I think the SmackDowns overall have been pretty solid. I mean, we said that before the hiatus, you know, that they tend to be better than Raw, just in general. But I'm interested because I know that I've heard that take, and you know, there's evidence for that, John. I get it. But I don't know that that's how that's going to play out. And the reason that I say that is it seems to be a lot more geared at the Daniel Bryan versus Shane McMahon dynamic. And the fact that this last week, you know, on SmackDown, it was kind of like, not that they were working against each other, but they were continuing to tease this thing where Shane's like out of touch and not making the right decision. And then Daniel Bryan's doing everything. And is he, you know, trying to undermine? So I feel like they're kind of playing it, like you said, but they're really, once again, going to the tried and true, you know, backstage bureaucracy storyline that I have to say does get people to pay attention, to be fair to them. You know, people do seem to like some of that weekly what's going to happen, just like they did with Kurt Angle when they dragged it out forever. But unfortunately, what you should probably have learned by now about WWE is the longer the wait, the worse the payoff will be. So just as Jason Jordan was the payoff, if you want to call it that, of the Kurt Angle angle, God only knows what they're going to come up with for the payoff of the Daniel Bryan, Shane McMahon.
Well, I can tell you what I read the other day.
Tell me.
Is that the plan is for WrestleMania 34 to be Triple H and Stephanie versus Daniel Bryan and Shane McMahon. I'm sorry. Who was it? It was Shane McMahon and Kurt Angle. I'm sorry. So Triple H and Stephanie versus Shane McMahon and Kurt Angle, with Daniel Bryan in the middle of it, both sides trying to get Daniel Bryan to take their side.
Well, that would make sense with sort of how they're playing it, so I could see that.
But it doesn't. So what? We're gonna have Daniel
By
Bryan.
the way, here's my question for you. If you're correct and Sammy and Kevin go to Raw, then they have to. I mean, then who goes to SmackDown? Because there's no way you can't lose both of those guys and replace them with nothing.
What do you think about Braun Strowman going over?
Yeah. I mean, that would cover it.
You know who I think would really benefit from it would be Finn Balor.
Well, that would work too, except remember, you're taking two heels, because that's the thing. Braun is a face now, officially, right? I mean, or because he's got to be, because he's, getting beat up by
Triple
Kane.
H look like he's going to shit his pants?
Right, he's staring down Triple H. So Braun is now basically another one of these faces without acknowledging that he's a face that they're so in love with. So it's interesting. I mean, I think that the Owens-Zayn part is kind of a swerve. I also think, and tell me what you think about this, I have not asked you about this before. I would absolutely love, and I'm going to go on record and say it right now, they almost have to do it at some point. There has to be a long con here for Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens, right? I mean, it has to be that Sammy's doing the whole, if you can't beat him, join him, and, I finally decide to help my friend, and eventually we're going to have to see that end as well, right? I mean, because that storyline is just kind of begging to be told, and I could just watch those guys wrestle each other another 45 times and not be upset about it.
Not in the least. And yeah, I think that's definitely a ticking time bomb. The question is, who's the babyface of the team?
Yeah. Exactly. Well, I think you have to go the other way at that point, because you've already sort of done the first way, and I think that makes sort of the whole story. I mean, it's going to be tough to get, Kevin Owens majorly over as a babyface at this point, but if the emotional investment is there, it could happen. And I think that would be kind of a cool thing. I mean, at least we could talk about then giving Sammy something pretty awesome to do, but it remains to be seen. I mean, I have heard what you said, and that could be in the offing. And let's face it, they've been stacking Raw forever. But, I guess time will tell.
I have a question for you.
Go ahead.
Does Bray Wyatt exist?
Bray Wyatt or Sister Abigail?
Bray Wyatt.
I think it's debatable right now. Apparently, Bray is, if you believe the tea leaves, Bray is in trouble for his marital situation. So, and far be it from WWE and all these stand-up citizens that reside in their ivory tower to allow any kind of, personal, any sort of personal angle to shade their judgment about a particular person, right? That would never happen.
I'm sorry, all it sounds like is another reason for them to push Roman over Bray. In their mind, in their justification of it.
Yeah. Well, listen, look, I mean, it almost doesn't matter because Bray didn't win even before all of this. So where is the doghouse when you're in a doghouse? Is there a doghouse for the doghouse?
You almost have to think so, because I don't know if anybody's had a worse year than Bray Wyatt.
You know.
He was WWE champion.
Yep.
And beat John Cena's 16th reign at that.
Yeah.
Then immediately lost it to Randy, which I understood why. Because Randy got his head literally cracked open last year.
Oh, God. Please do not make me relive the Bray Wyatt versus Randy Orton series of matches, because that's like psychological torture, having to think about how bad those matches were.
No, I'm just saying, why not put Samoa Joe, Bray Wyatt, and Braun Strowman on SmackDown and put Randy Orton, Kevin Owens, and Sami Zayn on Raw?
Well, that would work for me.
Because then you're gaining, SmackDown's gaining 2 heels and a babyface, and Raw's gaining 2 heels and a babyface, or 3 heels.
True. I mean, and to be honest with you, I've said this before. I don't know why Bray is a heel anyway. I mean, it doesn't. The gimmick is so over the top, and the interactive thing that they come down, the fans have the lights going. I mean, it has all the telltale markings of a face. Like, it's just silly. Mm-hmm. They should just make him a face. Get people excited about when he appears. And, then we could try to forget about all this other stuff. But this whole thing where he's really scary and, but then he never wins a match. I mean, the only thing that's scary about Bray Wyatt at this point is his win-loss record.
Yep. Which I think it's almost as bad as Kurt Hawkins at this point.
Yeah, but John, good segue, because at least with Kurt Hawkins, there is a point. He just never wins on purpose, we guess. I mean, at least there's, he may have better character development than Bray.
That's true. But nonetheless, I guess you could sum it up with time will tell. With everything we talked about this week. But that I think is going to do it, man. Do you have any last thoughts?
No, I would just say, I look forward to kind of seeing where some of these angles play out. You mentioned at the beginning that, this tends to be a little bit of a dormant time for WWE around the holidays, which I think is true. However, Royal Rumble is, around the corner-ish. And then we get into, of course, the road to WrestleMania, which you'll hear 1,000 times. So, listen, it's going to be an exciting time. Again, there's going to be a lot of stuff going on. It's not all going to be bad, but you are going to have to probably suffer through a little longer before you get to some of the, supposed good stuff.
So, that is true, unfortunately.
Yeah.
With that in mind, guys, have a great week. Maybe we'll see you later this week. Maybe we won't. I don't know yet. At John MEM Radio, at Darman Rockwell, DHARMAN Rockwell, and at WN_net on Twitter. You guys can check us out there, Facebook.com/MainEventMadness. Any works you got coming up on TJ Wrestling? We've got like 30 seconds left.
No, I'm good.
All right, sounds good. So, guys, until next time, be good, be safe, and we'll see you next time. Have a good one, everybody.